Welcome to the Autism Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Janeen Hershkovitz, and it's my goal to help you create a more peaceful home while living with autistic and neurodivergent loved ones. Each episode, we focus on a different room in the house and help you create a peace plan for your home. So let's get started. Hello, friends. We are in the art room today with Kelly Duza, a skilled art therapist and owner of Indigo Art Therapy Studio in Jacksonville, Florida. In this episode, we'll be exploring the transformative power of art therapy, discussing its methodologies, its definition, and how it uniquely supports the neurodivergent population. Kelly shares her personal journey and her self-care practices, and we delve into the concept of process-focused art, emphasizing the importance of creativity as a mindfulness practice and a form of self-care. We do have a trigger warning with this episode because Kelly does share a deeply personal story about her husband's battle with cancer and their experience with hospice care. So please listen with care, and if you need to skip this one, feel free. Be sure to listen until the end, where we'll wrap up our conversation with practical advice for parents and caregivers on how to nurture creativity in their neurodivergent children, encouraging shared art-making experiences to foster connection. This episode is one of my favorites, and it's a heartfelt exploration of art's healing potential and its role in affirming our humanity in difficult times. So let's get started. Well, Kelly Duza, thank you so much for being on the Autism Blueprint podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, Janeen.
So I want to start with the basics. Tell us a little bit about what art therapy is.
Sure, of course. And I know that you know what it is because we've worked very closely together. But it's funny because what I usually like to start with are people's conceptions about what they think art therapy is, and then kind of go from there. But it's a mental health profession. It's a master's level mental health clinic profession that uses art and creativity as the main part of the healing process. So it's a lot like talk therapy. Often people ask, do you talk in art therapy? What happens in those sessions? And so we'll talk about a lot of that. Yes, we do some talking, some folks more than others, but the primary modality for our support is art making, and that can come in many forms.
Wonderful. So your private practice is called Indigo Art Therapy Studio. Tell us a little bit about how it began and what makes it unique.
So it began, I started working with you in private practice, actually, Janeen, years ago. And I think that usually where you'll find art therapists, you find us in a lot of different spaces. And I think that's why people have questions about, well, what do you do? Because I encountered this program or that program, and it looked like this here. So I've worked in museum settings, hospital settings, in school settings, and it might look different depending on the environment that we're in. But in the private practice setting, which is where I started working with you, I felt really drawn to that specific type of work, the outpatient mental health support, clinical work that we do. And so that's essentially the setup of Indigo. What's unique about our studio, which is based out of Jacksonville, Florida, is that usually you'll find in private practice, like maybe one art therapist, that's part of a group practice. And we're usually like the weirdos of the bunch. And people are like, I don't know what they do over there in that room, but it looks kind of fun. And so it's pretty cool at Indigo. We're actually a group practice of art therapists. We're a team. There's 5 of us. And now we've added dance and movement therapy as well. And so we are an outpatient clinical mental health care facility. And we do provide one-on-one and group support as well. But it's all expressive arts therapies that we provide at Indigo.
Wonderful. And I know that you guys are very skilled at helping the neurodivergent population.
Yes, it's actually one of our areas of expertise. And we always say we work with creative, highly sensitive people. And so within that umbrella is definitely neurodivergent people.
Oh, that's wonderful. And Kelly, I know you had given me permission to share that you identify as neurodivergent yourself.
I do. Yes. And I don't talk about it a lot, but I did give you permission to that we could touch on that. But yes, I wasn't diagnosed until adulthood, like a lot of us. And it's not something I talk about a lot for my own personal reasons. But I do think that for some, being diagnosed is well, for everyone, it's a privilege to have a formal diagnosis. And so I think that there's a lot of people that wind up self diagnosing when they get to know themselves better. But for me, I did have a formal diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome. And so people who know me well, they just they may or may not even be aware, but my besties know. And
Yeah.
it's helped me learn how to care for myself and understand my life and practice self-compassion and
Mm.
also serve others in the
Yeah.
ways that I do.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask how has it changed anything for you?
So I was diagnosed like in my early 30s. I'm 45 now, and absolutely, it changed
Mm.
um, for me. Sort of like I mentioned, how I care for myself for the most part, and the self compassion that I'm able to give myself. So
Yeah.
I've always just been kind of the weird girl, the quirky girl. Certain things have been a struggle for me, like um, formal academics or speaking like this, and sensory things, social things, and and I've obviously, I have a master's degree. I'm a business owner. I'm a single mom. Like I'm
Wow.
I do a lot. I've done a lot, but there was a time in my life where I thought that because the way that my brain works, that I was not intelligent, and I had made a story for myself that was just like, oh well, you know, you're just not smart or you're just not capable. And what I've learned over the years, it's like kind of frustrating that it's taken so long to learn these things. But I mean, everyone's on their own personal healing journey, right? But I've learned to that what my strengths are is what's allowed me to do these really cool things in life and kind of create the lifestyle that I've created for myself that works for me. I'm very fortunate to have work that I'm able to like multitask and be very multidisciplinary about. As a practice owner, that you get to work your brain in a lot of different ways.
Right.
Um, and to make my own schedule and structure my own routines. It
Yeah, well,
means
that's very, very important for your self-care. When, a
yes.
9 to 5 job at a desk working for somebody else is not going to work for most neurodivergent people.
Yeah, and I've done it. I've been, I would say a person that hyperfunctions as kind of a trauma response. So when my nervous system is overly stressed, I'm like going hard.
Yeah.
And but I will burn out very quickly. Autistic burnout is something that we commonly talk about in the therapy space. And so that was something that was good to know about myself is I'm weirdly like a high achiever sometimes, but that off switch isn't always there unless I've got healthy routines, self care that's sensory based and art based.
Yes. Oh, what a great segue. I was just about to ask you about how art can function as a self-care practice. What does that look like in life, both for you or for your clients? How can we use art as a self-care or creativity as a self-care practice?
Yes, creativity. Because, right, it's interesting that word. I mean, even just when you kind of reframe that to creativity, it opens up this wider umbrella. And because I think as adults, we have this preconceived notion of art and what that means. And we were told somewhere, my partner and co founder or co owner of Indigo Art Therapy, Devin Schlegel, who's our clinical director, she says this a lot when she teaches workshops and teaches folks about art. But we learned somewhere in life that we were not an artist. Like most of us were told in like elementary school, oh, this person's a quote unquote artist. That person is not. Like this person, you do art and you go do something else.
Right.
um, and so we don't give ourselves permission, even though it's an inherently human practice. And I feel like we should, maybe it helps to broaden the definition and say creativity or creative, because then we can start to remember and realize all the ways that, maybe we can access art for ourselves or that we already do. So it's kind of like, let's start from there. Let's start with, well, what do you already do in your daily life that's creative? What brings you joy? What gets you in touch with your senses? And I think everybody has something like that they do, hopefully. And if we don't, that's what we're here for, is to help you figure out what your thing is and how to reconnect with your creative self again, in a culture that wants us to kind of monetize those things. And that's another reason why we feel like, oh, if it's not art for sale or to hang on the wall somewhere, then we shouldn't do it.
Yes. Oh, I just saw something on social media yesterday about it said something to the effect of every creative thing you do does not have to become a side hustle.
Oh my
It's
goodness. And
creative.
I have to always, gosh, I went to art school, like so to be an art therapist, you have to kind of minor in art and psychology, major in one and minor in the other. So like all of us that are art therapists, we went to art school in some way. And so for us to reconnect with the creative process, we're like unlearning a lot of these things that in our culture, yeah, and with my clients, my all my clients, my neurodivergent adults especially, like if they make something really beautiful, which we don't always make beautiful art, we do process focused art, but we'll talk about that. But if they make something really beautiful, it's that tendency to go, oh, like, oh, people might like this, maybe I can sell this, maybe I'll do that on the side. And which is fine, it's good, but it's a relationship with art and capitalism that we kind of have to like work on and work through. And if you are practicing art, making art to sell, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. It's fantastic. But, for those professionals who do, even to find that authentic creativity, it's like you have to do things that scare you. You have to do things that are weird. You have to do things that are messy and not meant for consumption. And that's ironically when your art becomes something that people actually want to see.
Oh my gosh, that is so. I think that's probably going to be like a clip that we'll share with people. That was so beautifully said. Yes. I want to dig into what you said about process art because when you and I first met and started working together, um, you opened up a whole world for me, Kelly. I am not someone that would consider myself an artist. I'm not someone that would have considered myself a creative at all. And you helped me really kind of embrace that side of me that we all have that creative process inside of us. And I had never thought of at the time I was blogging for the practice. I don't know that I was podcasting yet, but podcasting I had never really considered a creative endeavor until I really started getting into it. And it's been such a fun,
Yes.
creative way to express
Yes.
myself, because my
Yes.
goal ever since I was a child was to help people. I don't know what it was. There was just something inside me that said, I want to figure out how to help people live
You're so
better
good
lives.
at it too. I'm like getting emotional because,
Well, you are too. I mean, this is it's
well,
that's why we were drawn to each other, I think, because we have those same values, and that same heart for others. And I think, um, what you taught me, well, so many things that you taught me. One was that you don't have to have a beautiful finished product for it to be valuable. So, talk a little bit about process art and what that is.
okay, that's one of our favorite things to talk about.
Mhm.
um, well, and especially for people. So I think again, like at Indigo, the art therapy that we usually practice is visual art, but we're leaning more into somatics, and addressing the body and the senses as a whole as well. And so we do incorporate other modalities as well, but it's mostly thought of as using the visual arts. And I think that's where a lot of folks feel a block, right? Is well, maybe I can do, other forms of creativity, but I don't know about visual art, like painting, drawing, collage, whatever it is. So that's where process focused art comes in. It's it's a process that is basically a mindfulness practice. And so people are now more comfortable with the idea of practicing mindfulness, which is wonderful. I feel like we've come a long way with that in the last decade or so, where it's just kind of normalized and people are aware of what mindfulness is. I used to explain it a lot more. Did you find that as
Yes.
well?
I feel like I don't really have to explain it. But for those who aren't familiar with mindfulness, I usually refer to it as living in the present moment, being
Yes.
aware of what's
Just
happening
that.
right now.
Absolutely. It's just that, which to do that, and the things that we teach, kids are like the five senses game, because the pathway to the present moment, which anxiety doesn't really live in the present moment, it lives in all these other future thinking bubbles in our mind. So, weirdly, whenever we hone into the present moment, um, anxiety kind of dissipates, and we can have more clarity. Our nervous system calms down, but the path to the present moment is the senses. And so, whenever we talk about process focused art, it is a mindfulness practice that engages the senses. So,
Mhm.
we're teaching people to um, work while your inner critic is more present at first, because the inner critic doesn't go away. That little voice that's like, you're no good at this, or this painting looks silly or bad or weird. Those thoughts are going to be there. Just like how if you try to sit down to meditate, and me and most of the folks I work with can't just sit and meditate. Like we have to do something physically. So the painting or the art making becomes, and I just say painting because it's like what people think of, but can be any art media, becomes the object of focus for your mindfulness practice, which is just so lovely when you think about it. It's easier to practice mindfulness when you have a tool with you that you're touching and feeling and observing. So we direct people, we help facilitate this practice, which it is just a practice.
Mhm.
First of all, we try to not worry about what the product will look like. It is process focused. We don't worry if it's going to be beautiful in the end or not, objectively.
Mhm.
And if we can see it that way, tap into our inner child, who the version of us before, before we wherever we were that we learned we're not a artist, like tap into that part of us,
Mhm.
um, who would, if you think of like when you were a child, how you would make art, it was not worried about what it would look like. It was just very pure and raw. And so giving yourself permission to play. Um, and then if your brain gets kind of, um, if it gets those negative thoughts, or if you start noticing that you're somewhere else, worried about your responsibilities or the future or your stress, or even if your art isn't good enough, that's a good time to check back in with your senses through the process of art making. So, as the art therapist, we're there with you um, to kind of be your gentle guide in that practice. So we're not telling you how to make your art. We'll help you. We'll tell you how to use the tool. We'll show you different ways that you can like explore the material.
Mhm.
Um, and so you're not just on your own trying it. We're encouraging. We're providing some feedback, some validation, and then we're working with you really closely. We are attuned to the individuals we're working with, so we can help them through that process and bring them back to the present moment and just say, well, what does this brush stroke feel like on the canvas? Or if we're using sensory elements, what does the texture feel like to you if you just hold it in your hands? Sometimes there's a scent to the materials that we're using. So we just tap back into even the sound of like brush
Mm.
strokes on canvas. It's so calming. The
Mm.
repetition, um, all these things that just bring us back to earth and
Yeah.
the enjoyment of it.
Wow.
So that is process focused art. It's a practice. It's messy, it's fun, it can be weird, it can be uncomfortable at first, but we've worked with hundreds of folks doing this type of art making, and um, by far, we just hear from people, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know I could make art, and look at this, I'm doing it, and I feel better." And yeah, we've seen some amazing outcomes.
That's amazing. So, if someone out there is listening and thinking, I would love to do that, but I don't even know where to start. What would you recommend that where could they start? Should they start with drawing or painting or coloring, or what do you guys usually recommend?
Yeah. Um, I would say start with where you're most comfortable, especially if you're just kind of independently creating. Um, Routines are big. And so just I'm going to go like two places with this. One is just kind of mapping out, like thinking of creativity as like a daily practice, a short 5-minute practice, ways to weave that into your daily life. And then I can also share like a quick practice of what you can try at home.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So first of all, just where to start is to think of art making and creating as part of your daily, like, emotional hygiene. It's sort of like brushing your teeth or taking a shower or cleaning your space. Um, I think that it is a vital form of self care. So, like, it really doesn't matter what your art is. So, the example I might give might be visual art, but think about what feels best for you. I don't do visual art every single day personally,
Mhm.
um, but I play my ukulele or try to maybe observe um, the nature and the senses if I'm able to get out for a walk. Um,
Mm.
I'll do a creative ritual of some sort, or I'll dance really weirdly, like something. So just think about you want to build it up, right, to like 20 minutes a day, maybe. But if you just start with 5, just do what you can. Having a space. You and I have talked about this a little bit. That can be challenging. Not everyone has an art studio in their home. Most people don't. So when I say have a space, that can be a small sketchbook with, and I'll sometimes encourage my clients to have a bin or a box of some sort that they might decorate or embellish that has their creative tools kind of ready to go.
Mhm.
So don't even need a whole. space in your home, because that can get challenging. But just having a dedicated space, as in materials, a sketchbook.
Yeah.
And I would recommend even a small sketchbook to start just for doodling. Um, right? So
Smaller makes it a little less intimidating,
it can
I'm
make it
guessing.
less intimidating, and it can be gratifying to like know that you did it. Yeah, it's less intimidating and it feels like maybe something you could accomplish
Yeah.
and feel like, oh, well, I did that. I filled that page and it's not hard to do.
Yeah.
And then when it's in a sketchbook, you can kind of see your process over time as well. But
Oh, and I think that that's really cool. I know you know this story, but I wanted to tell our audience. My husband, who retired a few years ago to stay home with my son, started drawing. And he wasn't what you would call an artist. He wasn't, someone that had this experience earlier in life. I mean, he's in his 50s, and he decided, I'm going to start drawing. Now, if I were going to start drawing,
amazing.
I'm very type A, I would like look up a YouTube video or take a class, or like I would want a recipe, right? And which I know
Absolutely.
you're going to tell me is fine, and I
It
can
is,
do
and you
that.
should.
But for my husband, he just grabbed a sketchbook and started drawing things. Like he took pictures that he liked and tried to copy them, or things like that. And one day he started hanging up his art in our bedroom, which is really his bedroom, but that's another story. It's now his bedroom. So he started putting it up on the wall so he could see his progress. And we could see his progress, which was really cool. Well, then he started adding to it. We now have a space in our house in a bedroom that is floor to ceiling, all four walls covered
Amazing.
in this collage of art that's mostly his, some of Ben's, because Ben loves art too,
Mhm.
some from my daughter, and one or two things from me.
I
That,
absolutely love to hear this. And I know that you've shared about your neurodivergent family
yes, yes.
on the podcast because
Yep.
I'm one of your biggest podcast fans. But and and I know you're fam, but I think it's lovely you have such a creative family, Janine, and I think that it's just it makes sense for Joe to create, for Ben to create, and you as well. I will share
Yeah,
our
please do.
yours. Well, you went to school for singing, for vocals, right?
Oh,
Like,
that's right. I did. I forgot, Kelly. Oh, that's right. I was a musician at one time in my other life. Yeah.
and but and that's where probably I would encourage you to practice is sort of that where you found joy before, which I know it probably became not super joyful if you went to school for it and it became like here's how you become a singer and like the rigid practices and maintaining your vocals and just the training of it all. Um, so, but just allowing yourself to sing in the car,
Mhm.
like
Of
on your commute. Do you do that?
course I do.
Yay,
Of course I
good.
do. By
Or like,
myself. Yeah.
well, because singing is so powerful. It enacts your voice and
Yeah.
it's empowering and it's a release of energy and it's just such a wonderful creative modality.
Yeah. It also stimulates the vagus nerve, which controls our fight or flight.
That part I didn't even think about.
It does. And, my
What?
daughter, who studied musical theater in New York City, told me that the type of breathing that she was taught to do
Oh my
with
God.
singing, she said, I would feel so much better after a
Yes.
rehearsal or after I had to sing something, just because it shifts your sensory system. And you don't have to be good at it for it to work.
So you can sing really loudly and badly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
Well,
mean, it's the same as like yelling into a pillow, right?
yes. Yes. And that feels so good. That is a release. And sometimes it is also a catharsis to do something where you want to scream, but you're singing. I think anyone who listens to music that, there's all different levels of music that sometimes you want to hear, sometimes louder, sometimes angrier, right?
Sometimes
And
80s punk rock is just the thing.
yep, sometimes it is. But but I think that what you're touching on there is, so maybe singing is something that you've, sometimes we want to feel successful at our medium, and that's why I always say take a strength based route. So do what you know you're kind of inherently best at, what you've enjoyed maybe when you were a kid. Maybe you were a kid that was in band class. And so tapping into what you are organically drawn to can give you that instant gratification where there, where you're not so maybe intimidated because you're like, I know you are like, I'm a good singer. Right?
I'm okay. I'm okay. I think I was better when I was younger, but yeah, and I do enjoy it. And I'll often, my daughter and I, if there's a song on that we both like, we'll start singing along. Like if she and I are in the car, it's so much fun because like we'll sing together and we'll harmonize, and it's just fun.
Well, and harmonize, and so when we're talking about working with, connecting with your neurodivergent kids, harmonizing, vocalizing, you've got co-regulation, you've got attunement going on, and even if there's not, um, even if we don't have kids who are verbal, often singing is a way that like they're able to connect on, with making vocalizations and even singing back and forth. So that joint connection is just so healthy. It's so wonderful to, yeah, to sing with someone else. So if you don't, and I think if you don't have tools and materials handy, right, to like make art, visual art, then all these other forms should certainly be considered. They're just as valid. I've been, so I want to do things that make me uncomfortable in my creative.
Wow, good for you.
Just where I'm at in life, Janine. I'm
Yeah,
I feel like I'm in the era of just sort of when, over the age of 40, and you kind of want to do more things that scare you and
yeah,
things that you're not good at. And so what I'm enjoying doing is learn dancing. That's something I've never been good at. Like I was the kid in ballet class that was looking at all the other kids at the end of the line trying to see what they were doing. But I've learned that movement helps our nervous system so much, especially bilateral movement, crossing the midline. And I'm a yoga instructor as well. I incorporate that into my work with clients, and I like doing it. But I was like, no, I want to kind of like learn, learn some dances, learn some choreography. So I'm just teaching myself at home. Like there, you
I
can learn
love it.
anything on YouTube, like you said. And I'm like,
Yeah,
I want to, I want to learn stuff. I'm bad at it, but it is so fun. And I feel so good. So that's been my creative practice lately, which I'm not going to show anyone maybe
yeah,
for, yeah.
just for you right now. Yeah. Well, and fun is a word that I don't think we talk about enough. We as adults, we don't value, well, and some people do, and I love that, but I know that for me, I didn't value having fun or creating something. I was like, I got shit
Right.
to do. I don't have time to have fun.
Yeah, you're supposed to be leveling up. You're supposed to be bossing
Right.
up. Like what?
Yeah, I got to make more money. I got to save for my child's future,
I
but
know we almost give ourselves these badges of like, oh well, I'm like so busy, and and
yeah,
that's
it's like a badge of
rewarded.
honor how busy you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So fun is seen as frivolous. It's seen as that you said the word productive, right? It's not,
Mhm.
fun isn't considered productive.
Right,
Um,
right.
and art sometimes isn't seen as something that is productive. And
Mhm.
so this is some of the first conversations we have with people in the art therapy space is knowing that making art is productive. First of all, just like how rest, um, we have to have rest.
Yes.
Otherwise, we won't be good for anything or anyone. We won't be able to communicate clearly. We won't be able to have insight or self awareness or support others. Yeah, so
Well, and And that kind of brings me to the next thing I wanted to bring up, which is using art and creativity as a form of resistance. And when I say resistance, I think what I'm talking about is that our society right now, our world right now, it feels so cruel. It feels like we've lost. No, now, and whatever side of the aisle you're on, I don't care. But if you're a cruel person, I do care, right?
Right, there's
So
folks right now that feel very marginalized and not wanted and not cared for, in
not
our
valued as human beings.
not valued as humans. And
Yeah,
and that is, I think, as people who provide mental health support now, we're feeling that weight,
yeah,
um, and our work is hard. We have to meet collectively,
hmm
to hold each other up, but we are really feeling for our most marginalized individuals right now, which
yeah,
in the neurodivergent community, we also work with a lot of LGBT and trans folks as well,
right.
um, and who are scared. And
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't matter what anybody's opinion is about their lifestyles, about someone else's lifestyle. It's the value of the person, valuing humans and treating them with kindness rather than cruelty
well,
that I'm just really stuck on right now. And I feel like art can be a connector. It can be a way of not only self expression, but I know that when I look at art, it makes me feel something.
yes,
And in the world right now where we're either feeling really super stressed or numb or dulled down, I'm just hearing this from so many people that they just can't imagine, like, why would I create something when the world is falling apart? And it's kind of like this is the time to embrace our creativity and our humanness. This is the time to connect with each other on a human level.
we need art now more than ever.
Mhm, mhm,
We have this conversation a lot, Janine, now in the studio. Because, yeah, it does feel, a lot of folks feel helpless and hopeless. And
mhm.
they kind of feel like, well, if I just do art, that's a selfish act and I should be doing something for others. And, you know, we've provided caregiver support. And I know that you've told parents for years that you have to wear the oxygen mask first. Um, like if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't help. And so it is not only just, I mean, for our neurodivergent people, for LGBT people to make art, your art is an act of resistance because you're affirming your existence by making art, even if you don't share it with others. Because I think we live in a culture now where it's like we're all meant to feel somehow just exhausted, burnt out, fatigued. We're tired of the constant onslaught of information and bad news, and um, it can burn out our nervous systems really quick. So I think all of us who are super sensitive, our nervous systems are like massively burnt out. And
Mhm.
in order to, so we need to start with self. So art art can be a form of activism when you can make art, you can make posters for protests, you can make things that you want to share, publicly. But it, inner work art is just as valid as rest. And we know in activism spaces that this is actually being talked about and encouraged, that rest is a form of activism.
Right.
And art making as well helps us regulate our nervous system so that we can better see things, so that we can better communicate our needs, our ideas, our humanity. I mean, it's horrible that we have to communicate our humanity to others,
Yeah. Yeah.
during this time, but yes, art is so important right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so In our homes, I know that my son has been creating art ever since he met you, which was when he was a teenager. And so we have in our home created spaces where we can, make art together as a family and things like that. But that wasn't something that we did. It wasn't even on my radar, because we weren't artists. But as a result of kind of embracing it and seeing the value in it, there's not a lot of activities that I can do with my son who's limited in his verbal abilities, is limited in so many areas. But if we can sit together and make art side by side, we don't have to talk, but we're expressing ourselves together in the same space. And there's
It's a
just,
nonverbal way of connecting with others.
yeah, yeah. And tell me a little bit about how art space in your home, if you're comfortable talking about it, how an art space in your home helped you heal.
Yeah. Um, and I've told you, Janine, that giving examples of how art has helped clients, I always feel vulnerable talking about client. We don't even share client art on our social media
Right.
for educational purposes. So it's often our own work that we'll talk about without sharing too much. And then we might share about people that give us permission. But um, personally, yes, my family has been through a lot. We've been through a cancer journey. Um, and my husband battled stage 4 prostate cancer, which was a 4-year journey. And we were definitely in survival mode for 4 years. Um, and so he is a creative person. He was neurodivergent. He had ADD, and just really was always creating ever since I knew him. He and people are learning this about him, but he always had tons of sketchbooks and just a closet full of paintings and art supplies. He was a sculptor, actually a really gifted sculptor. He did digital art. Um, and as a family, we have a son, and who is 13 now, but at the time he was in elementary school as we were going through this journey. And we decided at some point that we would, like, just to give ourselves that ability to have creative family time. We would have our little, it was like this cheap Walmart table that we had as our coffee table. It was a $10 table that we put in our living room, and I started putting butcher paper on our coffee table. That was kind of the hub of our household. And I would put crayons out and colored pencils, and I would switch up the art materials because, I'm the art therapist of the family. I do the
Right.
setup. But so we wouldn't really have to have scheduled times to make art together. It would be something that was just organically always there. And then when guests would come as well, they would create with us on the paper, on the table, and add their little bit here and there. We started to cut out some of the drawings and make a big collage, like you guys did in your household. We had an
Uh-huh.
art collage in our hallway that was our family's art and the people who would visit their art. And so it was this very, like, informal way to infuse art making into kind of our daily life, because it was placed there. So you can think about placement of things. And then
Mhm.
this as well, that um, towards, so when my husband entered hospice care and I was caregiving, something we decided to do as a family was to always have a creative space in our home. So sort of during those very strange year, when you're caregiving in that way, or when you're on a journey like that, you feel so disconnected from the rest of the world. You're just in this strange bubble and rarely leaving the house. So um, it's like you have time on your hands, but it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So art was our saving grace. And my husband, Ian, his ability to do art in the same way that he used to was shifting. But we made sure to keep it accessible as long as possible to him. And then also to create, we basically converted our dining room area into an art studio space, because we realized we weren't sitting down as a family so much and eating dinner there. Um, and so we realized there was a room in the house, which we're very grateful to have that extra space. So that was a project that allowed us to feel like we were doing something, and doing something productive, I guess. But converting the dining room into a studio, and then as part of his legacy, I decided that whatever home we live in, me and my son, we will always have an art space, a dedicated space for art. And we were able to get the sort of studio set up, so my son would create art in that space right next to my husband. So he would be enjoying the art being there passively, even
Mhm.
um, from his bed, which was in that room. And right there in the hub of our house, I would paint on the side whenever we had the time and downtime to do that.
Mhm.
Just activating the space with art made it feel like, even though nothing was normal, that at least that's what was normal about our family, was that we were still making art,
Mm.
and and having an outlet to make. And that's what we did. So
Kelly, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know how vulnerable that is, and I knew Ian really well, and he was such a wonderful, wonderful person that I remember when he went into hospice and you sending me pictures of you were painting your dining room. I'm like, what are you painting your dining room for?
like, she's lost it. What is she
I'm like,
doing?
okay, Kelly, all right.
Yep.
And then you showed me, and it was his favorite color, which was
Green.
green,
Yes.
and it was green, like
It's still
awesome,
very green, and we
very green. And you had your son's Lego creations on one side, and then just
oh
it was just beautiful. It was just so beautiful. And I know that that helped Ian tremendously during that time.
the Legos too. I mean, and so you've got open-ended processes, and then you have the more structured um, practices of, like, Legos. Like you
Mhm.
said, you want to find something. You're the type of person that wants to have sort of instructions, and
Yeah.
that can feel safe for people. That's what really felt safe for my son. And you know, you've got built-in success with Legos. Um, it is a 3D art making with a blueprint, and you feel like you are tangibly doing something that will have an outcome. But it's also that brick by brick soothing. My son still does Legos to this day, girl. We have to build, like, more shelving and stuff to fill the shelves with these big Lego creations. But for him, that was his safe place, was focusing in on just the repetition, but also helping him feel empowered, um, that he can do something very productive. And then he could be really proud, because he was pretty young to be making these ginormous Lego builds that he made. They were quite impressive. And
Yeah.
then he felt proud and less powerless. And I think when you're going through a medical journey, which that is one of our areas as well of specialty at Indigo, is working with people who have rare diseases and chronic illness, and working with the medical communities, um, you often feel powerless. And art allows you to feel a sense of power and control when everything feels wonky and out of whack.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I want to shift for a minute and have you talk about what you guys are doing at Indigo to support people on their journey to use art and creativity in their own lives.
So at Indigo, locally, there's our studio space. So we do in-person art therapy, mental health support in Jacksonville, Florida. And we have added, like I mentioned, dance and movement therapy as well. We do provide individual and group support, both in person and virtual.
Okay,
We
can you do virtual all over the state of Florida?
I was about to say that. So, yes, we can do virtual art therapy just in the state of Florida.
Gotcha.
And we're actually expanding our, like I just mentioned, sort of working with medical communities. And there's another branch of arts and healing that's referred to as like arts and wellness, or you can call it arts and medicine, but non clinical art making is something that we are sharing more and more at Indigo. We've been providing programs for um, patients with a rare disorder called neuromyelitis optica all across the nation, doing non clinical art based mindfulness workshops, basically, where we're just teaching art for self care and having a good time with community. So that program, it's been so special to our hearts. We're actually expanding that work that we do. So the arts and wellness, we are able to help more people, not just in person or just in the state of Florida, but we're able to sort of reach out to those that might be in other places or folks who might feel isolated and want to connect through virtual community. We can work with organizations, and it's really fun that we can tailor fit these programs for either individuals or orgs or special populations. But so right now at Indigo, we're launching Indigo Arts and Wellness, which will allow us to provide this process focused art practice um, across the United States. And then if you want to if you want more of the clinical art therapy, feel free to reach out to us, or the American Art Therapy Association is a good resource for finding art therapists in your area, or the Art Therapy Credentials Board, our credentialing body, the ATCB. So you can look online if you want to find an art therapist near you for that clinical support.
Mhm.
That's how you'll find art therapists. And then I just shared what we're up to at Indigo, just sort of, you might be able to join some of our programs now, even if you're not in the area.
Wonderful. So I will make sure that I link to all of that in the show notes so people can get in touch with you and your programs.
So,
Kelly, I'm so grateful that you came on today and shared your story and your knowledge. I have one more question for you that I usually end all my interviews with, and I'm going to word it a little bit differently today. So, if a parent or caregiver is listening and wants to support a neurodivergent child's creativity at home or at school, what advice would you give them? What would you want them to know?
so I would tell them to follow your child's lead. I think that's the biggest thing. Um, and just kind of see where that takes you. But I would encourage you as a parent or caregiver to sit and join with your kiddo in their creative. Like, don't just hand them the crayons and let them go to town. I would encourage parents to find the time to sit with your child. You don't have to even be talking. Keep that part in mind,
Yeah.
that it can be a quiet practice where you're just sitting together and making art together. Notice how you feel before, during, and after. And I will
Mm,
share, as I said earlier, I was going to share a little. exercise you can do
Oh,
um,
yes, please.
in the home. So a little quick 5-minute practice is one of our favorites to teach is a breath portrait. And so we talked a lot today about mindfulness and how art making can be a mindfulness practice. If you're a clinician, you can do this with your clients very easily as well. So a breath portrait is just connecting your breath to a brushstroke or a line. So all you need materials wise is something to draw on. It can be scrap paper. It doesn't have to be fancy, and something to write with or draw with. So that can be a pen or pencil, a crayon, or it can be paint. And so a breath portrait is just taking a few minutes to connect your breath with a line on paper. And you can get very creative with that line. It doesn't have to be, it can be that an in breath is up and an out breath is down. But you
Hmm.
can explore sort of winding lines. Notice if you're moving fast. Is your breath fast? Well, make your brush strokes fast. Or are you slowing down? Go slower, and just give yourself maybe like 3 minutes to work with these lines on paper. And if you want, you can leave it at that. That's enough. But
Yeah.
what you'll be left with is a a, a page, a paper with a line. And you can always use that line as sort of that can be your map to experimenting and exploring. That can be, you can fill in those shapes that you've made when the line has intersected
Mm.
the basic elements of art that you're working with, line and shape and color. So you can play around with those very basic elements. Anyway,
I
that's my
love that.
quick
I
activity.
love it. Love it, love it, love it. I will link to all of the things we talked about today in the show notes. And Kelly,
Great.
thank you so much for what you do and
Thank
just for
you.
being you. I'm so blessed that you're one of my very dearest, closest friends. I'm just so lucky. Thank you for being here today.
Janine, I'm equally as lucky. And thank you so much for having me on. It's always so fun to connect with you and talk to you anytime. I
See you
appreciate you.
soon.
Much love.
The information in this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional.